going on, man? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself, Neil?
Fantastic. We have New York Times bestselling author Tom Clavin on the program. Tom, thanks for stopping by and congrats on all your success of your books, and we appreciate you stopping by again.
Well, thank you for having me back on the show.
All right, Greg, go ahead with
Yeah,
your
that's
first question, Tom.
fantastic. So Tom, it's great to meet you, and thanks again. But let's talk a bit about Bandit Heaven. What makes that story different than what was told in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid?
Well, one thing about the story Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, which does hold up, but I think most people will overlook the fact that movie is now 55 years old. It debuted in September 1969. So there's like two generations of people that may not have even seen that movie, and maybe for the most part be unfamiliar with the story of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. So I wanted to update that. And another thing about it too is that movie really focused exclusively on the title characters, which makes perfect
Mm,
sense. Not only is it called Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, but you have Paul Newman and Robert Redford at the height of their powers, so to speak. Why put the camera on anything else? So the fact is that there's a lot of other people involved in the real true story of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and the Hole in the Wall gangs and the Wild Bunch women and outlaws and lawmen. And I wanted to paint a broader picture what was going on in Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, Utah in the 1890s.
excellent.
So, Greg, are you a fan of Westerns?
I'm a huge fan of Westerns, and that was one of the questions I wanted to ask Tom. How did you get into loving Westerns? And who are your favorite influences? And do you watch any of the modern stuff like 1923, 1883, Yellowstone, all that
Yeah.
stuff? Yeah.
I'm of an age where when I was a kid, from the time I was a very young kid, that you were surrounded by Westerns. On the small screen, you had Rawhide, Bonanza,
Yeah.
Have Gun Will Travel, Wanted Dead or Alive, Big Valley, shows like that. And it was still commonplace that you could go see a double feature on a Sunday at the local movie theater that might be showing a Glenn Ford Western and an Alan Ladd Western, something like that. So it was something that was a big, much, to me, it seems like a much bigger part of our popular culture then than it is today. So, but that's true for a lot of kids in my generation. There's very few have been lucky enough, like me, to actually make part of my living by writing about the American West, the stories of some of the famous characters, and the real stories behind the stories that we know, which can be just as interesting. And so I think that's what I did not intend to be writing about the American West specifically. When I did my book Dodge City. That came out in February 2017, and then immediately went on the New York Times bestseller list. And that was supposed to be a one-off. I thought it was a really good story. Bat Masterson, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, 1875, Dodge City, Kansas. But it did so well that my editor was really twisting my arm, saying we've got to find another story. That became Wild Bill, and Wild Bill became Tombstone, and Tombstone became Follow Me to Hell, and everything up to Bandit Heaven. So it turns out, without seeking one, I have a pretty strong following of people who, when these books come out, they sell like hotcakes.
Wow. And then it's very interesting in the whole thing, Tom, is, once you figure out one that can work, you pretty much prepare yourself to kind of what the audience wants, right? Once you figure it out.
Well, I think one of the things I figured out that they want is they want to have a lot of stories that they haven't heard before. I mean, the movie Tombstone is on every night on some channel, the Kurt Russell 1993 movie. But there's a lot more to that story if you read the book than appears that they could put in the film. So one thing they want is stories they haven't heard before. Another thing they want is they want to see these real characters portrayed who have been household names. They want to see a Doc Holliday. They want to see Bat Masterson. They want to see Wyatt Earp, the Earp brothers, the McLowrys, the Clantons. In Bandit Heaven, you want to see the true story, which the movie only skimmed over. But who really was Butch Cassidy? It was a fellow named Robert Leroy Parker. Who was a Sundance Kid? His real name was Harry Longabar. He came from Pennsylvania, not from the Utah or Colorado or a place like that. So to find out information like that about these characters, what they were, at home, so to speak, the audience really wants.
Wow. And how do you do your research for all these books?
Well, I like research. I know writers that find research real drudgery. I don't. I really, really enjoy it. And I think the one way that's reflected in the book is that there's stuff in there that you wouldn't ordinarily find out about. in Bandit Heaven, how was it that this bad guy, Long Beak as his name, his beak nose, how did he end up as a pair of shoes? I'll tease you with that one. That's a little research beyond the usual research. So thankfully now, because of the vast amount of internet sources available, you can do the research more efficiently, actually more deeply and more efficiently now than say 20 years ago, where you had to physically travel to more of these places. You had to go to the National Archives, Library of Congress. You had to go to the Cody Museum, the Cody, Wyoming History of the Buffalo Bill Museum. For the Texas Ranger, you had to go to the Texas Rangers Hall of Fame in Waco. But most of that you don't have. When Bob Drury and I were working on a book on Valley Forge a few years ago, we discovered that everything, absolutely everything that George Washington ever wrote is available digitally. You press a button and thousands of pages of his correspondence and speeches, his household checklists, they're all there. So it's a mixed blessing. I mean, it's a great blessing that you can research so efficiently and find out so much information from my desk, my office. But I do sort of miss making those personal trips to some of these locations and digging through the dusty files.
Mm.
No, and that's the research has changed so
Yes,
much, hasn't it, Tom? Do you ever try to implement AI with brainstorming any of the stuff?
I haven't done anything related to AI. Now it's interesting that my one of my publishers contacted me about this company an AI company that wants to take one of my books and use it for trading purposes. And I said no, just because I'm not suspicious necessarily. I just haven't had time to really delve into AI and what the ramifications are for authors. So until I have a chance to, if I ever do have a chance to do that, I'm not participating.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. That's your IP. So,
Yes.
and being a tech guy coming from me, that means I'm worried more about your property. So which has been like your most favorite of all of these projects that you've worked on so far?
God, it's so like, who's your favorite kid?
I know, right? Yeah, yeah.
And my
I
brisk
could tell you.
my brisk answer is the next one, or the one I'm working on now. But for the books that I've done with Bob Drury, we've done 8 together. I have a special affection for two of the 8 books. One is The Heart of Everything That Is, about the Sioux Indian leader, Red Cloud. And the other one is called The Last Stand of Fox Company, about the Korean War Company, the Army Company, the Marine Corps Company, excuse me, in the Korean War. And I have a special affection for them. But, I love Daniel Boone book I like a lot, Blood and Treasure. Um, of my solo books, I have a particular fondness for a book called Lightning Down, which is about an American flyer in World War II, ended up not in POW camp, but in Buchenwald, and along with a lot of other Allied flyers that nobody knew about, and their attempt to survive absolutely brutal conditions. And I think Dodge City I have a real fondness for that because not only did I really like the story, and I think it worked as a book, but it opened up doors wasn't even knocking on. So I think I just got really blessed being able to do that book.
Got it.
Very, very interesting. I think that Tom, in this process of writing books, do you see yourself going outside of the Western route ever?
Well, I do. I'm working on a book Lightning Down was not a Western. That was a World War II story. I'm working on another World War II story right now about it's a true story, nonfiction, about the most successful submarine the Americans had in the Pacific Theater during World War II. And it's on a very last war patrol, a torpedo went rogue and sank the submarine.
Hmm.
The captain and some of the crew survived, and then had to survive Japanese prisoner of war camp. So it's a real story of survival and first of success, and then everything flipped. The sub sank. They were desperately to try and get out of there. It's a rescue story. It's a survival story. So yes, every so often I get a chance to. I haven't had a chance to do a sports book in a while, which I miss because I love sports
Hmm.
and especially baseball. And I haven't. I did one with Dick Enberg back in 2018 on Ted Williams, and I think that might be the last sports book I've done. So I missed that.
Oh, Ted Williams. Yeah, well, Red
Yeah.
Sox,
Yeah.
the best.
Oh yeah.
So the Outlaw Trail, what was the period? What was the time frame of that? And you know, why was it so difficult, for the lawmen to keep control of that area?
Well, the Outlaw Trail went from basically the Canadian border through Wyoming and Montana down through Colorado, Utah to New Mexico to really the Mexican border. And it was a place where it was obviously off the beaten path. It was known by many of the outlaws. A lot of the people along the outlaw trail. I mean, it wasn't there wasn't a signpost that said outlaw trail. I mean, that would be obvious. You know, you stake that out, you're going to catch somebody. But it was really a series of trails and back roads and dirt roads and things that they could travel. And the people along the way were used to these outlaws. The outlaws treated them kindly. They gave them food, exchanged horses with them, water. And the three big stops along the outlaw trail was Hole in the Wall in Wyoming. Then there was Brown's Hole, which was straddled, I think, the Utah-Wyoming border. And then there was Robber's Roost. And these were isolated places that were easily protected, easily guarded by the outlaws. Actually, they built houses in there. They had their
Oh,
own horses and cows that they raised. And the lawmen, they couldn't. It would have been suicide to try and penetrate these havens for the outlaws. So most of them didn't try. Those that there's some stories in the book about the couple who tried and they paid the price for it. So this took place in the 1880s, 1890s. By the time that Butch and Sundance, Butch was sort of like the Don of Dons. He was like the head gangster of the western part of the United States in the 1890s. Once the lawmen actually and civilization progressed so that the outlaws became endangered species, let's put it that way.
Mm.
When Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid, and Etta Place, Sundance's wife, they went to New York and left America in 1901 and head to South America. That was pretty much the end of the outlaw trail and the end of that, what you could probably say, the end of the American West outlaws as they had been defined since the Civil War.
wow. And you think that history repeats itself in different civilizations, different times, even the United States, that there are places that are very hard to control, right?
Yeah,
Especially.
exactly. Really the outlaws in the 1920s and 1930s were the gangsters. Legs Diamond, Babyface Floyd, Babyface Nelson, Machine Gun Kelly, people like them. And they had their own stakeout places that they could hide and people who would hide them. So it's sort of like that outlaw mentality and activity repeated itself in America in the 1920s and 30s.
Wow. So Tom, do you ever in your personal life, have you ever like done any Western stuff, gone, horseback riding or a cowboy experience
Not
or do any
cowboy.
Western shooting or
I'm actually a pretty good horseback rider. So last time I did it, I had to get some rust off, but it turned out well. I have an affinity for horses, I guess. But when I do these books, I'm doing this research, even though I'm not necessarily researching I shouldn't say that. I could be researching at the South Dakota Historical Society, for example, in Pierre. I could be researching at Salt Lake City in the Utah Historical Society, and I go to a lot of these places. When I'm doing Follow Me to Hell, I want to see what that U.S. Mexican border is like in the
Hmm.
southeast part of Texas, which is where most of that action takes place. Dodge City, I've been there several times. Tombstone. While Bill Hickok's favorite place to live when he was not on the trail was Kansas City. I've been Kansas City as recently as last month, and so I don't wear a Stetson. I don't wear Spurs. I don't go around pretending to be a Westerner because I'm not. I was not born in the West.
Yeah.
But I think my enthusiasm for the West comes through in the books.
Absolutely, they do, and that's why they're successful. Greg, go ahead with your last question for Tom.
Oh yeah, sure, Tom. Thanks so much. This has been
Sure.
fantastic. And I read strictly either entrepreneur books, business books, or technical books, but I'm going to dive into your library because I'm pretty excited right now after talking to you.
Good. Thank you.
Um, yeah. Anyway, so tell me, Tom, what do you feel is the most important thing in life that you've ever learned?
Don't take things for granted. When it comes to work, don't take things for granted. If you're going through a good spell, it's not going to continue. Don't take it for granted that you were touched by some heavenly power and everything's going to be great. Don't take for granted your family, your loved ones. Don't take for granted your community. I think we sort of get used to our surroundings and our family, and we sort of lose sight of what they're like, and what they mean to us, and what we mean to them, and the connections that we have. So if it's I've surprisingly I've learned very little. I'm not that smart. I wish I was smarter to have learned more lessons in life over the years. But one thing I think I can say with safely say I have learned is don't take people and things for granted.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. All right. Thanks again. All right. That was the